Hi, I'm Richie Zellon, and in this video I want to clear up a series of misconceptions when it comes to transcribing solos or even simple phrases by your favorite artist. I also want to offer some insight into solving many problems that players encounter when first attempting to do so. And we're starting now. Welcome back to the Jazz Guitar channel, and if this is your first time and you want to learn everything you can about the art of playing jazz guitar, please subscribe and be sure to click the bell icon so you won't miss anything. When it comes to transcribing a solo, there is a why, a when, and a how. The why may be obvious to the majority, but to many players, the when and the how are not so clear. So in this lesson, I want to answer these questions, and in doing so, hopefully clear up a series of misconceptions. And I want to encourage you to comment and share your experience transcribing solos, as well as any additional tips that might be of help. So why transcribe? Simple. You like how a specific artist improvises over a given harmonic progression, and you want to analyze it so you can integrate his or her ideas into your playing. This can be anything from a 4-measure 2-5-1 cadence to a full-blown solo. And like I said previously, the why is obvious to most. It's the when in the player's development that determines whether or not the time and effort spent into transcribing will be efficient and yield good results. So in order to better understand the when to transcribe aspect, let me share with you a true story. A fairly proficient rock and blues player decided he wanted to learn jazz. Due to the fact that he only knew how to solo using pentatonics, the teacher he went to showed him a few 7-note modes. After getting good at playing these scales throughout the whole fretboard, the teacher taught him what chords in a standard to use each scale with. Next, he asked the student to go home and practice improvising over a given standard. A few months went by during which the student practiced consistently. Nonetheless, he soon determined that his solos weren't sounding anywhere near that of any jazz musician he listened to. While his favorite artists played interesting phrases, both melodically and rhythmically speaking, the student noted that his improvising sounded like he was running a bunch of scales with no sense of melodic direction. So at his next lesson, he expressed his frustration to his teacher. To this, the teacher replied, "The reason you don't sound that good is because you lack a jazz vocabulary. So what you need to do is transcribe solos or portions of solos that you like by your favorite artists. Then you need to study them and try to introduce them into your own solo." So the student now had his work cut out and decided to spend his time attempting to transcribe portions of different solos. Now, before we continue, we have to take into account that this rookie jazz guitarist, like most guitarists who make their transition from a rock, blues, or even country background, have no formal music reading or writing skills. To this, we must add that they don't have any formal ear training. So even though many have developed a good ear, they can't necessarily identify nor label what they are hearing with the proper theory. So these days, most guitarists resort to tab. And this is fine when it comes to learning a riff based entirely over, say, a single minor pentatonic scale. But keep in mind that the rhythm nor the notes and their function in relation to the chord of the moment are specified when using tab. So back to our story. Having a good enough ear to slowly match on the guitar and successfully notate in tab all the notes that make up the chosen portion of a solo that he chose, our rookie jazz guitarist finally completed his transcription. And it looked something like this. Well, maybe he later added the chord symbols to each measure, but the rhythms and the function, the melodic function of the notes remained absent. So he went on to practice his transcription until he could play it at tempo. Next, he put on a backing track and attempted to play the memorized transcribed phrase every time a related chord progression came up. Sometimes it fit and sometimes it didn't. And one reason is due to the fact that when learning his transcription from tab, since there was no rhythm notation, he never played it the same. And you would think this is good because we want to vary the phrases we transcribe in as many ways as possible when we improvise. So what was going on here? Why did the notes of this short transcription work with certain rhythms and other times sounded awful, even though it was being played over the same chords? The reason is because a typical jazz phrase is not only made up of diatonic scale tones that blend with the chord of the moment. In addition to these scale degrees, there is frequently one so-called avoid tone in the scale, not to mention several foreign chromatic notes used. All of these notes need to resolve to a neighboring chord tone, and when they are placed over certain rhythmic values, they tend to delay this resolution, and in doing so, they stand out and clash with the underlying chord. So if you're not aware of what is going on here, your application of that transcribed phrase is going to be a hit and miss proposition each time you introduce it. So to continue with our story, despite this matter, our rookie jazz guitarist continued with the transcription process for several years. And aside from experiencing similar results when improvising, there was a benefit from all this effort. His ears got better and faster at matching the pitches he heard on a recording and matching them to the proper place on the fretboard. In addition, he started hearing certain combinations of notes from his transcriptions that he was able to recall over certain chords when improvising. But even though portions of his solos sounded better, it was still through trial and error because he did not understand how to fully analyze what he was transcribing. That is until another teacher took him under his wing and supplied the missing resources to help him transcribe effectively. So he went back and retranscribed the portion of tab we saw previously. And except for some annotations I've added, this is how it probably looked with the analysis. Not only are the rhythms present, but each note is analyzed as to what melodic function it is performing in relation to the chord of the moment. This analysis is of paramount importance to understand what makes the line tick. With this understanding, we can then transpose it to any key, fingering, and much, much more. Notice that this is a 2-5 and that it starts on the root of the 2 minor chord. The next 3 notes comprise what is known as a 3-note enclosure, resolving to the flat 3. That is, the 2 is enclosing the flat 3 from below, while the double chromatic is enclosing it from above. This is a typical bebop approach note concept. The flat 3 is then followed by the 5, the flat 7, and the 9th. So we can clearly see the inclusion of a minor 9th arpeggio here. The 9th then smoothly transitions by stepwise motion to the 5th of the 5 chord, the dominant chord. And it is followed by a 4, which acts as a passing tone, resolving to the 3rd. It then returns to the 5th, proceeds to the flatted 7, leaps down to the 2, creating an unprepared approach to the 3, and concludes with the flatted 7. Wow! This is a line by Joe Pass, and it all goes to show that by understanding these concepts, we can get so much mileage out of just a 2-measure transcription. That is, we can now model new lines based on the brilliant architecture of this line. For example, we can start the line on the third instead of the root and transpose all the concepts accordingly. We can vary the rhythms without overextending an approach note, and the list goes on and on. So this is truly what transcribing is all about. And by the way, this foundation is what I teach step by step in my bebop guitar improv series courses. So if you are lacking in these resources and want to take your playing to the next level, please be sure to check out bebopguitar.richiezellon.com. So having shared all of this, I can now disclose the fact that the jazz guitar rookie I described previously is none other than yours truly. But it's not only my experience, but one that is shared by many guitarists I know. So understanding when in your musical development you are ready to transcribe a jazz solo will make the process much, much more effective and can save you years of frustration. So I know what you are probably thinking. Acquiring all of these skills is going to take a long, undetermined amount of time. Yep. And you don't want to wait years before attempting to learn that solo you love. Well, that is one of the reasons why the market is flooded with ready-to-play solo transcriptions. Until you develop the proper skills, you should gradually be using these resources to learn the jazz language. Enough said on when to start transcribing. And for those of you who are still with me, let me share a few tips regarding how to transcribe a jazz solo. Assuming you feel ready to do your own transcriptions, my first recommendation is to take advantage of today's technology. Back when I first started transcribing, we didn't have specially dedicated software for this purpose. We didn't even have computers. I started by slowing down vinyl recordings to half speed, which also brought down the pitch an octave. I also remember in the 80s, I purchased one of those Marantz cassette players that slowed down the tempo along with the pitch too. Today, thanks to the advent of the digital era, there are several apps that not only slow down a recording in any percentage desired, but preserve the pitch in its original octave. And I don't want to spend too much time on what apps are out there, so I'm going to recommend my favorite, which I've been using for several years. It is called Transcribe. It's available for both PC and Mac. So on to my first tip. When starting to transcribe, you want to follow the evolution of jazz. That is, I don't recommend starting out with, say, John Coltrane or some post-bop recording or some fusion. Pick something earlier in the evolution of jazz and hopefully not too busy. Actually, some early Miles Davis is ideal. Also, make sure you understand the melodic concepts that are being used in that era in the evolution of jazz. If you don't understand what's going on and what you end up transcribing, you may be able to play it, but you'll probably have trouble making it your own. That's why I recommend getting a good foundation in the bebop language. It is the common foundation of all jazz as we know it today. The second tip I want to share with you is actually regarding the process of transcribing. I recommend working in 2 to 4 measure phrases. First, notate the chord changes. Usually you want to copy these from a real book and make sure that it is in the same key as your recording. Listen carefully also for any chord substitutions or reharmonizations. And then slow down the phrase to a comfortable tempo and transcribe the pitches only by placing note heads without stems on the staff. And finally, go back and then transcribe the rhythm by adding the stems, ties, etc. to the corresponding note heads on the staff. My third and final tip is to determine where you are going to play it on the instrument and thus make fingering annotations so that when you practice it, you do so in the most efficient way and also stay consistent. Well, that concludes why, when, and how to transcribe a jazz solo. As usual, I'd love to hear your comments. And please feel free to share any experiences you've had transcribing solos and any additional tips that might be of help to others. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and be sure to click on the bell icon so you won't miss anything.